Another strong Pacific system moves west to east across the country, affecting the Great Lakes, the northeastern U.S., and laying down a track of snow across the central states. Let's take a look at the 72-hour history of that snow. Quite a bit of it in the Mogollon Rim area of Arizona. Also a pretty good dusting, maybe a couple of inches in the mountains of southeastern Arizona. Then moving out into New Mexico and Texas, as it interacts with that moisture from the Gulf, we start picking up some significant snow from around Roswell towards the area between Amarillo and Lubbock, and that spread out into Oklahoma and Arkansas, and some much heavier amounts. The yellow colors, those are going to be around 6 to 9 inches. And as we get into these darker browns, that's getting more towards 10 to 12. Some heavy snow also in southern Missouri. And then some lighter amounts there into Illinois, averaging about 3 to 5 inches. And then we get back into some heavier snow in Ohio. The surface analysis for early this afternoon shows the low pressure area in western Ohio, 999 millibars on that, and wrapping in a significant amount of warm air. Temperatures coming up to near 60 degrees right there in southern Ohio, and coming up well above freezing near Cleveland. Up to the north, though, a large band of snow in the Great Lakes out to Chicago, and further south we get into the warm conveyor belt, and that's supporting this squall line, although the thunderstorm elements are more confined to Florida. Up to the north, just some very heavy rain across the Carolinas. And that line extends all the way down into the Gulf of Mexico. In the western Gulf, we've got cold air advection sweeping into the Gulf. Temperatures only in the 40s and 50s. But we can see by the thickness lines, these red and blue lines here. And I should kind of explain that a little bit. The red lines are going to be the 540 and above decameter contours. And that's usually going to correspond to where the thermal structure supports liquid precip. And the blue, that's below 540, and that's going to support mostly frozen precip. That does vary. As a rule of thumb, 540, which is this purple line, that's going to be the transition line, but that can be a lot lower, especially in the northwestern U.S., where they tend to get that transition line around 530 to 525 decameters. Okay, well, enough of that. What we see here is thermal troughing across the central U.S. That shows that cold air flowing southward, and the thermal trough extending from North Dakota all the way to Kansas, and a significant amount of cold air all the way down into Colorado as well. But as we can see by the temperatures here, not really that severe. In fact, in Montana, already coming up to 30 degrees. So the bulk of the cold air, that's going to be in the Dakotas. Temperatures in the teens this afternoon, could be a lot worse. But it is enough to change things because it's been kind of a mild January in a lot of parts of the country. Heading out west, clear skies, but north winds. When we see those north winds at Las Vegas, that's a good sign that polar air is invading the Great Basin area. Las Vegas, they tend to see winds out of the south and southwest the vast majority of the time, but not today. Further up the coast, some fog here and there in the valleys, and then we pick up a strong southwesterly flow into southeastern Alaska. Temperatures in the 30s and 40s, and even in Yukon, very warm temperatures just above freezing in Whitehorse, 37 degrees this afternoon. And then we get back into the cold air in Alaska. Temperatures well below freezing in the north part of the state, and even out west, some sub-zero conditions. Continued very cold in northern Canada. Temperatures about where we've been seeing it, about minus 20 to minus 30. The coldest temperature that I'm seeing here is minus 36 at Cambridge Bay. And the center of that air is over southern Nunavut. We can see the concentric appearance of those thickness contours outlining the center of the deepest, densest cold air. And of course, that is moving south into Hudson Bay. And they do have severe cold warnings in effect in northern Quebec. It's going to get colder. Temperatures minus 13 right now, but they're expecting minus 40 to minus 50 by Thursday. Let's take a look at that hemispheric plot. And what we see here looks like maybe a 5-wave pattern. 1, 2, I don't know if that's 3 right there, 4 or 5. Okay, yeah, we'll go for 5 waves. So things are going to be progressing, and I don't really see too much blocking. The pattern is a little bit squirrely over Europe, but we've got one lobe of the polar vortex over Hudson Bay and a much larger one across Siberia that was responsible for some of those record-breaking temperatures. China had its coldest temperature ever back on, I think that was Monday morning. They were down to minus 63 at Jingtao, which is going to be located about right in here. Also, some of that cold air did spill out into the Sea of Japan, and they've got some very inclement weather in Japan. This is the current map out in Japan. This is going to be about midnight local. And Osaka, which normally sees a dusting maybe once or twice a decade, they've had severe snow warnings. Now, this event is just about over. This is what it looked like 24 hours ago, and you can see those strong northwest winds. That's all that Siberian air that crossed over the Sea of Japan, and it actually sank a cargo ship somewhere in that region. And that was probably very much like a Edmund Fitzgerald type accident. In Korea, again, this is 24 hours ago, but they had some extreme cold in that area, temperatures hovering around 0 to 10 degrees all day. And when I was over there for a year, I never saw any temperatures like that. Our coldest day was maybe 15 to 20 overnight and a high of maybe 25 to 30. So these are some phenomenally cold conditions. Let's take a quick dive into the forecast patterns, and we're going to be seeing a tendency towards ridging on the west coast. You probably remember last week and the week before, endless series of weather systems with strong zonal flow, and now we've got ridging in place. And keep an eye on Alaska right here. We run this forward, and you see a tendency towards ridge building. There's a big ridge building over Alaska, heights rising in that area, and that helps bring some polar air southward through Canada and into the U.S. Let's focus a little bit more on the U.S. Let me run that back just a little bit. So we're looking at Thursday here, troughing out east, ridging out west, and just a series of smaller scale troughs diving southward. Those tend to generate short-lived Alberta clippers. And as we go into Saturday and Sunday, pressure falls, or I should say height falls out in this region. That's going to be associated with development of some Arctic air and also troughing on the northwest coast. That ends up digging southward and closing off into a upper level low across the southwestern U.S. around midweek. So we got this split flow pattern going on, one segment down there in the southern U.S., another up north, and the north one will be bringing down cold air. The one to the south will be infusing moisture into a lot of this mess, and that means out east, maybe some inclement weather developing around midweek, the potential for some snow and sleet, freezing rain, depending on where you are. We're going to have to work that out as we get into next week, but eventually we do get some of the ridging coming in from the west, but still unsettled down there in Texas. Then we're getting into late in the week. That low finally opens up and another one digs southward. So it's going to be kind of cold and unsettled over the next 1 to 2 weeks. So let's take a look at the surface patterns. Again, we're looking at the GFS forecast. And I've got a new field here. I've got the surface potential temperature in Kelvin. That's going to be these red lines. So that basically corresponds to your isotherms if you reduced everything to sea level. So you can definitely make out where the cold air is. This is going to be a chart for this morning. Let's bring that up to the current time. You're probably watching this in the evening, so there you go. There's the chart for this evening. So the coldest air, yeah, that's going to be right there in southern Nunavut, like we talked about just a few minutes ago. Temperature's down to 236 Kelvin in that area. You can subtract 273 from that, or vice versa, to get the Celsius temperature. So 46, 56, 66, that's going to be about minus 37, I think, Celsius. All right. So, yeah, there's the other branch of that cold air coming down into the Dakotas, and our larger pool of somewhat milder cold air coming south through much of the eastern U.S. All right, and let's roll that forward and see how things develop. And we can see an Alberta clipper coming together right there in Alberta and Saskatchewan. That's going to be the cold front. There's the warm front. So an area of warm air advection right there. And on the backside, there's going to be cold air advection coming south with that north flow. And let's watch that come on down into the north central U.S. This is going to be about Thursday evening, going into Friday morning. The first good Alberta clipper coming south. And it tracks into the Midwest. The old occlusion heads into Ontario, but down here in the south side, that's going to be the tail end and the leading edge. Friday night coming into Illinois and Iowa. And then some of that air banked up against the Rockies all the way into Alaska. I really like this North American sector. We can see everything, not just the U.S., but also Canada and Alaska. Everything is interconnected, and a lot of our air comes up from the northern U.S., or I should say northern Canada, and that takes a long trek southward, so we want to kind of look at everything. But we've got this large transition zone. Doesn't look like any strong waves working on that region. So it's just this big, large, high-pressure area just kind of oozing into the high plains and the Rockies. And we can see the 1056 millibar high over Yukon sinking southeast. So that's going to push some cold air southward as it works down through British Columbia and Alberta. There's the leading edge right there. Sort of stuck there in Kansas later on Saturday. However, some of that cold air working into eastern Washington, and they may get some strong canyon winds through that area up to 40 to 50 knots. Not too sure about snow at this point, but the model is trying to break out some precip out in that region. The cold air continues sinking south through the weekend, approaching Dallas Sunday, and it's already passing the Rockies into the Great Basin area, into Salt Lake City, maybe even Boise. So it does have some depth, certainly. Looks like one little wave to the south getting some storms going in Louisiana and Mississippi for Sunday, and behind it the cold air comes south. And there's what we're looking at for Monday. So cold air is on its way south. Now we're up to Monday morning, or Monday evening into Tuesday. And the Great Basin area is definitely getting some of that cold air, as well as the eastern U.S. And just looking at this chart, I can see the temperatures are right around 15 degrees at Chicago. See, there's the 264 Kelvin line, and that's going to be minus 9 Celsius, which is about 16 Fahrenheit. All right, so yeah, it would be helpful if the potential temperature lines were in Celsius or Fahrenheit, but in meteorology, we use Kelvin for those units. All right, so let's see. Going into Wednesday and Thursday, still plenty of cold air up to the north. Another round of it trying to push south. But I do see some warming coming in from the west. And we get towards the end of the run, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of cold air coming south. It's just kind of being portioned out down into the north central and eastern U.S. But we'll keep an eye on this for any changes coming up over the next week. I did want to check on our atmospheric river potential. We're looking at the Pacific Ocean. There's Hawaii, and there's the U.S. So this is precipitable water, the scale in inches up at the top. So generally your green is going to be 1/2 inch to 1 inch. That's getting into the threshold values for precip. And as you get up towards the higher values, it tends to be a little bit warmer and a little bit more convective. You can see much of the U.S. looking pretty dry at this time. But going forward into the weekend, you can see a little surge of moisture coming up ahead of that Arctic air, which is advancing southward. This is going to be Saturday night. So this will support some shower activity from East Texas eastward. That's about the only notable intrusion of moisture we have. Out in the Pacific, some moisture is coming north, but not really reaching the west coast just yet. And as we get into midweek and later next week, yep, some moisture starts rearing its head off of California and entering the state. And that brings us up to February 4th. Looking pretty dry across much of the country. Not sure about the east coast of the U.S. They may be getting some of that Gulf moisture, but we'll check on that next week. So we can very quickly put the forecast together. This is this morning. Cold front and a little bit of cold air damming there in the Carolinas, and the warm front extending to the east. And that rapidly moves up into the northeastern U.S. This is going to be about midnight. The main Bear Clinic low near New York City, cold air like that, warm front, and they're going to get some of that warming in Boston, the precip changing over from snow to rain temporarily. And eventually things will cool down once again, and we've got those snow showers in the wake from the St. Lawrence Valley to the eastern Great Lakes, maybe even a little bit further west. All right, so there's our westerly winds, some warming for Friday, and we start with the Alberta Clippers. There's one right there, and an even stronger push southward for Saturday. That's going to be the cold air advancing south into the central U.S. and the Rockies and sweeping through much of Texas. Now, this does show a lot of green here and there. I don't have the snow overlays, so don't worry about that too much. A lot of this probably is going to be snow. And you can also refer to that handy 540 decameter line if you're unsure. So that's going to be roughly the rain-snow transition right there. And out in the western U.S., even though it's 534, remember that area needs a colder value, 534, 528, to get that snow. However, these are some unusually cold values for Northern California, so we'll have to see how things work out for Sunday. All right, so eventually we do push a lot of that cold air south, 540 decameter line coming all the way down to Oklahoma City. And it's going to be quite cold in the western U.S., especially Colorado, Wyoming, Utah. Some of the basin areas make it down to -20, -30. And Denver, possibly as cold as -10. And let's see, one little wave working across the southern U.S. The 540 line's a little bit too far north, so a lot of this is going to be liquid. And another little Gulf low around Thursday. However, doesn't look like too much deepening. Of course, this is 234 hours out, so we're going to have to see what the models do for next week. And just as a reminder, your Patreon support is much appreciated. Obviously, it does not cost much money to put this program together. However, this takes an enormous chunk in my day, and since this is basically all I do, writing books, software, and all that, that does take away some valuable time, so I need your help to keep this program going. And we do not run advertisements on this channel. If you want to keep it that way, we do need your support. Hopefully we don't have to bring those in. I do want to thank our newest Patreon supporter, Alexander Williams. Thank you very much for your support. Hopefully we'll see everybody back here again on Friday. Hope you have a great day, a great evening, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.